Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Thor Love and Thunder. Let's talk about it. So first of all, before we even get started, I just have to say that I'm suffering. Your girl is suffering, guys, okay? Like, I have a terrible toothache. My wisdom teeth are giving me such trouble, so I can barely speak at the moment, and that's why I sound a little bit funny right now. I'm gonna try my best to get through this video, but if you notice I have a bit of a lisp and like the way that I'm talking is a bit different, that's the reason why. So bear with me, please. And also, of course, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. And if you enjoy my reviews and if you enjoy my videos overall, then go ahead and click that like button. I would really appreciate it. Now, without further ado, let's get into my thoughts on Thor 4. So Thor Love and Thunder is directed by Taika Waititi, who also directed the third Thor film. Oh, this is really tough to say with this toothache, okay? He directed Thor Ragnarok, which is considered to be one of the best, if not the very best, Thor movie, and certainly one of the best MCU films at large. Now, the first thing to note here when it comes to Thor Love and Thunder is that Thor is the very first MCU main character to break the trilogy mold. Because of course, traditionally we saw our main characters only get trilogies and then they went off into the abyss. But this time around, because of the reinvention that Thor Ragnarok gave the character and breathed in some new life into this character and into this franchise, we did end up getting a follow-up with Thor Love and Thunder being directed by the same director. And I think when it comes to the Thor franchise, it's really fascinating to see the kind of journey that the character has gone through. I mean, we'll talk about it more when we talk about the character of Thor in this film, but just in general, when it comes to the Thor franchise, it has taken so many different shapes and iterations and tones. If you consider the first Thor film, which was very Shakespearean and grand, it was a great introduction into the character and into the world. It introduced us to our first planet in space, and we got to see how Marvel would materialize such a planet. And I think Kenneth Branagh did such an amazing job of making Asgard feel grand and luxurious and just beyond anything that you could see on Earth. And it was a really great introduction to Marvel space. But aside from this though, a lot of people do forget that even the first Thor film had elements of humor to it. I mean, you have the iconic another sequence where he throws that mug on the ground. Like, Thor has always had that kind of jokey element to him, and not just because most Marvel characters do. Like, most Marvel characters are known to have quips, but he's always had that element of like being a dumb blonde, like being very boisterous and kind of a fool. And it helped to contrast him against his brother Loki, who's more slender and intelligent and cunning. Which means that, of course, when we got Taika Waititi directing a film in this franchise, that was turned up to an 11. And now we have a very wacky, irreverent character that people have really come to love. So yeah, I would say that out of all of the franchises within the MCU, the Thor films have been quite diverse in terms of the tones, even though the character of Thor himself hasn't been quite as different as some people may think when you look back to his iterations in the first Thor film all the way up to the fourth one. But the worlds around him have definitely changed. But then, of course, with the introduction of Taika Waititi directing Thor Ragnarok, things are just kind of turned on its head, and now the franchise is almost unrecognizable. Although I will say that, of course, was only possible because of the major success that Guardians of the Galaxy ended up being under James Gunn. Oh my god, how am I doing so far, guys? Let me know down in the comments how you think I'm doing so far, because not only am I in pain, okay, not only is my tooth annoying the hell out of me, but I'm also so hot. Like, this jumper fits the Thor poster the best, but it's so hot right now that it's just, I should not be wearing this in the middle of July. I should not. I'm really suffering here. But anywho, now let's get into the good stuff. Now let's get into the stuff that I really enjoyed about Thor Love and Thunder. So first of all, going back to what I said about the tone of the movie and the fact that this is a Taika Waititi joint, as we can expect aspect at this point. This film is hilarious. This film is funny. The film, like, what can I say? The man is so talented when it comes to comedy. Like, his style of comedy is just so aligned with what I find hilarious. I really enjoyed that aspect of this film. I will say that because of the success of Thor Ragnarok, I think this film definitely gave Taika Waititi the confidence to just go fully just comedic, wacky, irreverent, and I for one think that for the most part it works very, very well. There were definitely critiques with Thor Ragnarok in terms of the lean into comedy, and perhaps at times it felt inappropriate and it felt like it undercut some more dramatic and somber moments. I do think that Taika Waititi learned from this lesson a little bit, or at least he tried to, because there were less kind of dramatic moments that were rudely interrupted by comedic beats. You know, when there was a dramatic moment, it definitely felt like he wanted to give that moment space, and he didn't want to slap it with, you know, a joke to kind of undercut it, which was a critique of Thor Ragnarok. Having said that though, overall the film is more comedic. It's definitely leaning in on the comedy, on the wackiness, on the kitschiness, and I for one really enjoy that for the character of Thor and for his pocket of the universe, because I just feel like it's really distinguished him as a character. It's really brought out the best in Chris Hemsworth's performance as well. So I really had a fun time with the comedy on display here. And the thing is, when it comes to tone, when it comes to comedy or seriousness or whatever, you know, people are always going to have their own personal preferences. I remember when Eternals came out. Oh god. I remember, do you remember? Oh my god. Do you remember when Eternals came out and people were like, this was dull as hell, this was boring as hell? Listen, there were many problems with Eternals. It wasn't just the tone, okay? But the tone certainly didn't help. And then even with Doctor Strange 2, with Multiverse of Madness, you had Doctor Strange trying to quip. Like, there were moments where he was doing the quipping and it's like, these jokes are dead. Oh, like, I just wanted it to be over. Clearly he's not a quippy character. Clearly he's not Tony Stark. So we can drop, like, we don't have to do that. Whereas here with Thor Love and Thunder, like, the comedy is real. The comedy is hilarious. And I think both, you know, the actors deliver exceptionally, but also Taika Waititi just knows what he's doing at this point when it comes to comedy. And I have to say, when it comes to the comedic aspect of the film, one of my favorite parts of it was, of course, the Zeus sequence. Guys, we'll talk about it later when we get into the characters, but that whole situation was worth the price of admission alone. I'm telling you, that whole sequence was just brilliant. Guys, I can't even make any sudden movements. I'm so hot. I think I might be dying. Anyways, so next up, let's talk about the storyline, shall we? Let's talk about what actually happened in this movie. So here at the beginning of Thor Love and Thunder, we are reintroduced to our favorite space Viking, but he's down in the dumps, guys. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, but you know, during the Infinity Wars, Thor lost quite a lot. He lost the majority of his planet because of Ragnarok, but he also lost his brother for the upteenth time. For the upteenth time, because he made the ultimate sacrifice to Thanos. So he ended up losing a ton, and he felt like he was just a shell of his former self. He had gotten out of shape and he started playing Fortnite, as you will recall in Avengers Endgame. By the way, I didn't love that phase of the character. Well, I enjoyed seeing Thor go through that, but I didn't love how it was something that was like worthy of mockery. But anywho, introduced to this version of Thor at the beginning of this film because of all of the loss that he has suffered and the pain that he's going through right now. You think about it, he's even lost the Avengers. Like, he's lost Steve Rogers, he's lost Tony Stark, who became friends to him, but so now he feels like he has no one, and he's therefore kind of created a wall within himself to block out the opportunity of loving anyone again, you know, to block out the opportunity of making friends that he feels close to and people that he can really care about because of how much he's lost. And so he's kind of thrown himself into this superhero gig where he's saving a bunch of people all across the universe with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and he's there just kind of doing the bit. Like, he knows his role at this point, he knows his costumes, he knows his lines. It just feels like he's running through the motions as opposed to allowing himself to really live in the moment. At least that's what the themes of the film are trying to tell us. But then of course later on in the film, especially when we get the reintroduction of Jane Foster and Thor's reaction to seeing his ex-girlfriend, particularly as she's now a Thor, particularly as she has taken on the mantle, I guess, of Thor, all those feelings that he was trying to kind of squash down and repress start bubbling up, and he doesn't know what to do. And eventually it leads to him kind of realizing that he doesn't have to block out all of that feeling, all of that love that he has for people who are close to him. He can allow himself to feel that, and even if he might end up feeling shitty, just like Peter Quill told him, at least he would have gone through that, at least he would have loved, and that's a better feeling than not having loved ever. So I really appreciate the message here, is my point. I really appreciate the message of this story. I think the title is perfect, by the way. The title is truly perfect for the message that they were going for in this Thor film, even though I do think the delivery of these themes and the delivery of this story was imperfect and sometimes a little bit clumsy. Now, another thing that I really loved about Thor Love and Thunder was the imagination and creativity of these set pieces. Guys, can we talk about the set pieces, okay? In particular, can we talk about the black and white one? Can we talk about the black and white one? Oh, I think that whole sequence looked so sick. I remember in Thor Ragnarok, you know, there was that moment, that kind of shot that we got that was so beautiful. It was almost like a Renaissance painting come to life, where we saw the Valkyries descend on Hela and Hela throwing up her weapons. That whole sequence of the war that took place that was forgotten in Asgardian history, I thought was materialized beautifully in Thor Ragnarok. But it was only like one snapshot, like it was only a 30-second moment in the film, and I wish that they had given us more of that because it was so beautiful artistically. Well, here Taika Waititi once again taking notes taking notes for what I want personally, and he decided to give us a whole sequence with Christian Bale's Gorr, who we'll talk about. Don't even worry about it, we'll talk about him, okay? But he basically exists in like the planet of shadows, the land of shadows or something. You know, there's always a land of something. There's always a land of something, guys. He exists there, and so, you know, when the heroes come to see him, all of a sudden they become desaturated like a Zack Snyder film. They become desaturated like a Zack Snyder film, and they go there, and there's this like action sequence that takes place in black and white, and I thought that was a wonderful addition. Why not? I just really appreciate the imagination of it all. Like, if you see just snapshots of this film from different set pieces, you wouldn't even realize that it's the same movie. It looks like totally different Thor films because there's such different planets that they explore, such different lands and characters that they explore, and I really love that about this movie. How can Thor Love and Thunder be more imaginative than Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness? And actually, speaking of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, one of the things that I think pretty much we universally agreed upon is that one of the best aspects of that film was the kind of horror sequences, the horror elements, especially as they pertain to Wanda and the way that they actualized the character of Wanda and the Scarlet Witch in that film. That was all great stuff. Like, well done. Well done, Sam Raimi, for giving us that. But I must say, one thing that I didn't expect from Taika Waititi was really interesting horror visuals as well, because my Gorr was looking scary. I'm sorry, listen, I'm a scaredy cat. I've said this many times on this channel. I'm a scaredy cat. There were moments where I jumped. There were moments when there were moments where Gorr's eyes appearing from the darkness had me shook, not gonna lie. But I know that, you know, just visually speaking, people were upset about his look because it's not comics accurate. I'm here to tell you something that I've said many times on this channel that I will repeat once again here in this video. Not everything in the comics looks good in real life, or at least in video. Not everything in the comics translates well to film. Some of you guys need to let the comic book aesthetics go, especially on occasions like this. Like, first of all, you have Christian Bale. Like, why would you not want to see Christian Bale acting, portraying the character of Gorr in this Thor film, and instead just be dedicated to the comic book accurate appearance of the character? Like, why would you choose the latter instead of the former? I personally wouldn't. I was more than happy to see Christian Bale's face on my screen as opposed to just some prosthetics, because that's why you get Christian Bale. And secondly, I do think that a lot of the visual changes were made because, as Taika Waititi mentioned, the character in the comics looks too much like Voldemort. He looks too much like Voldemort, and Taika Waititi feared that there would be those comparisons made between Gorr and Voldemort, so he ended up making a few changes. And also, he looks too much like Ebony Maw from the MCU itself. You know, Ebony Maw, one of the minions of Thanos that we saw in Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. He looks way too much like him in the comics, so it makes sense to me that they would make that visual distinction. And something that I noticed when I was watching the film is that at the beginning of the film, you see that he has these kind of markings on his body. I don't know if those markings are like natural, or perhaps there's something that he did because he was a worshipper of that one god who was a dickhead. That one god who sucked, okay? But later on in the film, you see that he has all of these scars, which I'm guessing was created by the, is it Nectar sword? Nectra's sword, whatever it's called. But he clearly used that sword to scratch out the markings on his skin, and that's why he appears all scarred and hideous later on in the film, which I think is a very clever, again, visual aesthetic. Now, since we are on the visuals, whilst I did very much enjoy the imagination, the creativity used here as we were jumping from set piece to set piece, I must say that the special effects, the way that they were realized, the CG, wasn't always perfect. And that was shocking, especially considering I sat there through the credits. You know, normally when I have the Marvel credits up, I'm like on my phone, or I'm talking to whoever I came to the cinema with. But this time around, I was actually paying attention to the credits and there were so many people involved in the CG and the special effects, as can be expected. You know, animators are in charge of every minute detail when it comes to CG. So like there'll be one person in charge of Chris Hemsworth's bicep, like well, maybe even more than one person considering what we're dealing with, okay? But there'll be like multiple people in charge of the smallest things, so it makes sense that there are so many animators on screen and so many special effects people. But I will say that unfortunately the end result was a little bit wonky, a little bit inconsistent. Marvel has been having this problem, a lot of franchise films have been having this problem. I believe it's because there are so many of them, and so many of them are CG reliant, heavily so, more than ever before. I think that's the problem, is that there are only so many animators and there are only so many days in a year, so that's why you have these like time constraints, and that's why it's materializing in very wonky CG. And I do think, as much as people mock James Cameron for the fact that it's taken him like a decade, is it more than a decade? I can't even remember, to release the sequel to the first Avatar movie, I think to his credit, his special effects speak for themselves. His special effects speak for themselves because the film looks airtight in terms of CG, apart from the facial movements perhaps, although that's really tough to do authentically. And I think it shows that when you dedicate that time and that technology and that budget to, you know, create these worlds and to create these characters with CG, the technology and the animators are really given a chance to create something magical and almost photorealistic, especially with the technology that we have available today. But when you don't have that time, when you have, you know, one movie or TV show coming out the wazoo every single day, it's tough to create something as photorealistic, and that's why we have some wonky CG in this movie, at least according to me. I haven't done research into this, but I suspect this is one of the biggest issues with the CG in a lot of these franchise movies these days. Oh my goodness, I'm still suffering. I don't know if you can tell. I don't know if you can tell that I'm sweating, but oh boy, am I suffering right now. And my tooth hurts so much. We gotta get through this. We're gonna get through this. Okay, we're moving on. Also, another thing that I wanted to mention, we need to go back to my good old friend, The Volume. Oh, guys. guys, I believe there was a time, once upon a time, there was a time when I really loved The Volume. For those of you who don't know, The Volume is a relatively new technology that Disney especially has been using in a lot of its projects, like The Mandalorian and other Star Wars stuff coming out on Disney Plus, as well as now Thor Love and Thunder, and it's basically a massive like LED screen that is able to capture these like worlds and backgrounds and environments and create a kind of green screen that's actually, you know, visually appealing. Like actors can actually act against it. The worlds are already materialized on that screen. So yeah, it's kind of like a 360 experience, and I think there are a ton of benefits to the volume technology, for sure, especially for the Disney Plus shows. They make them feel a little bit bigger than they would with just like a green screen or limited sets, which are incredibly expensive. Having said that though, there are restrictions to this technology as well. A lot of these worlds, whilst they feel bigger than just a regular old, you know, green screen, you still can tell that there's like a limit. You still can tell that there's like a limit of, I don't know, like maybe like 10 meters. I think like the worlds always feel like there's like a certain point where they just cut off. And I think that's something that they need to work on. Like I said, it's relatively new, this technology, so they're definitely learning how to use it best. I personally think that the volume works best when you're trying to create something crazy and atmospheric and just stunning to look at. Like the incredible action sequence that we got in black and white, you know, against Gorr. I don't know if that was done in the volume. I don't know which scenes were done in the volume and which weren't, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was done in the volume, because that was materialized really, really well, and I think that's where the volume shines. It's the same thing with what's that, Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Obi-Wan Kenobi series, where you have that action sequence between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan at the end there in the finale, and that just looks sick as hell, and that was clearly shot in the volume. So I think in scenes and sequences like that, the volume really shines. But when you're trying to establish like a living, breathing environment, I think it's very limited. Like for instance, the sequence that takes place in Omnipus City. I can't say even without a toothache, but but right now I'm struggling. Omnipus City, you know, the place with the gods, guys, you know, the place with the gods and the orgies. Yeah, in that sequence I suspect they also used the volume, but I felt like it felt quite fake, and it didn't feel tangible is the problem in a lot of the sequences in that scene. So I do think that the volume has its limits, and hopefully filmmakers can learn how to use it best as they go on and as it becomes an established technology in the industry. And since I'm already touching on some of these setbacks of Thor Love and Thunder, let me go ahead and talk about one that I think was quite severe, quite big, quite drastic, okay, and that was that this film unfortunately had way too many storylines, guys. And I could have told you this. I could have told you this before seeing the movie. I could have told you this when they had the Comic-Con and they revealed a bunch of these storylines that they were going to be talking about, and I already knew that sounded like a lot. Like, we were all wondering, those of us who are familiar with comics, either because you've read them or because you watch a bunch of YouTubers who talk about them, as is the case for me, those of us who heard those YouTubers break down the comic backgrounds of these characters had already started to ask ourselves, how on earth is this 2-hour movie going to do all of these different characters and storylines justice? And the answer was, it can't, and it does not. The answer is, unfortunately, it does not, because it couldn't. It was set up to fail, in my opinion. I think it was a huge mistake having all of these different storylines, especially considering how iconic and well known they are within the Thor universe in the comics, within Thor's run in the comics. It was a mistake to have them all in one movie. I think, you know, this could have been split up easily into 2 very well thought out films, and unfortunately they tried to cram it into one. We'll talk about the storylines that I feel were rushed and done a disservice in a moment when we talk about the characters. So the first character up we have, of course, is my guy Thor. My guy Thor. Thor is one of my favorite characters in the whole MCU. Yup. Yeah, because I have taste. I have taste, you see. I think that Chris Hemsworth as Thor was just genius casting. I don't think he gets enough credit for just how incredible he is as this character. People often talk about how perfect Robert Downey Jr. was as Iron Man, or even how amazing Chris Evans was as Steve Rogers, aka Captain America. You know, people always talk about that, but I think Chris Hemsworth as Thor is certainly up there. He is certainly up there with the best, because he is Thor. He has become synonymous with the character, and I think it's just an amazing character within this universe. Now, like I said before, Thor has always had that kind of goofy element to him. He's always been quite boisterous and like a little bit of a bumbling fool at times, especially as we saw in the first Thor movie, where he kind of lost his powers and was sent down to Earth as punishment by Odin, and he lost his hammer then, and we kind of saw him be a little bit out of his element, and he became, you know, a bumbling fool, like I said, a bumbling fool, okay? And that was always a great contrast to his brother, who was more intelligent and cunning and evil and so on and so forth. Those elements of the character were always there, but of course they were turned up to an 11 when Taika Waititi got his hands on this character in Thor Ragnarok, and I think it was for the better. It felt like they finally were able to get a handle on the character of Thor, and it finally felt like he was the main character in his movie. Because for a while there, I don't know if you guys remember, but for a while there in the Thor films, Thor wasn't really the one pulling in the audience. It was Loki. Yep. It was like Loki was doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the Thor franchise, on his back, okay, for the Thor franchise. And Thor was always great, always welcome, always a delight. But, you know, he and Loki were definitely competing for star power in those first movies. Whereas now, undeniably in this franchise, Thor is the king. Well, he's not the actual king of Asgard anymore, but you know, he is the king of this franchise. But Thor Love and Thunder isn't just about the laughs. There's also an attempt to really dive into Thor's psyche, try to understand where he is emotionally and how the past decade of his life has really affected him. I mean, if you consider the fact that this guy's like, what, thousands of years old, and the last 10 years have just been the crappiest of them all. Like, all of the nonsense has just been stuffed into a decade for this guy. It really sucks, okay? And it's really affected him, and he's having a bit of an identity crisis, as Peter Quill is able to note, because he himself is having an identity crisis. We'll talk about it later. But this film definitely tries to dive into Thor's emotional state and tries to come to terms with, you know, everything that Thor has lost, but also what he manages to gain at the end of the movie. And I think that is done really, really well. I think Chris Hemsworth delivers on both the goofy side of the character, but also those emotional beats. I will say that when it comes to Thor Love and Thunder, listen, Thor has never been shy about his buffness. Thor has never been one to blush at his buffness, okay? It's always been like an untold truth that Thor is like unreasonably attractive, okay? But here in Thor Love and Thunder, listen, Chris Hemsworth woke up and chose violence for some reason. Like, I was just going about my day, living my life, suffering from a toothache, and then I went to see this film and I was like, I didn't have plans to thirst on Chris Hemsworth. Like, that wasn't part of my itinerary for today, but somehow, oh, look where it is. Look what's happening anyway. Yeah, the thirst was real. I couldn't, like, what? Marvel. And what baffles me as well is that other than the thirst trap moments, other than the clear thirst trap moments, this film is like relatively heartwarming and like a solid family movie. So other than like certain jokes that are made and the obvious thirst trap moment that we saw in Omnipotent City, is that what it's called? This film is a family movie, but those moments are in the film. So what now? But anywho's, thirsting aside, going back to the emotional beats of the movie, we did get the reintroduction of Jane Foster, Thor's lost love, okay? Apparently they had a great love story that fell to pieces and ended up with them kind of separating and, you know, growing apart from each other as they lived two different lives in two different worlds, and Thor kind of reminisces on this, and I think that sequence was done very, very well, by the way. I think the sequence where, you know, Jane and Thor were in a relationship and we get those cut scenes that we never got in any of the Marvel movies, I think that was very convincing. I remember when it came to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, I was so pissed off that they were trying to convince me to care about Stephen's relationship with Christine when I absolutely did not. Like, I absolutely did not care one bit. Sis had already moved on, she was getting married, like, why are we rehashing this? But when it comes to Jane and Thor, even though I went in with the same mindset, like, why do I care about this? It's been a decade. It's been a decade since they broke up. Please. I do not care about this, okay? But having said that, now that I've seen that kind of sequence with them being happy together, goofy together, I just thought that was really touching and really convincing. Like, that was done very, very well. It just felt so genuine for some reason, even though of course it was laced with that Taika Waititi comedy, yum yum yum. So then of course when Jane and Thor have that reunion, it means all the more, and it definitely ties in better with the themes of, you know, reconnecting with a lost love, allowing yourself to love once again in order to feel that, you know, amazing feeling, as opposed to feeling nothing at all, which is what Thor has fallen into. Now at the end of the movie, unfortunately, we do see Jane pass away, adding to the very long list of people that Thor has loved and lost. But at the end there, we also see that Thor has gained someone else. He ends up adopting Gorr's daughter, who is resurrected back to life. She's resurrected back to life, and he takes her under his wing. And I think that was really touching. And I have to say, I was watching that whole sequence at the end there with Gorr's daughter. What's her name? Love. That's her name. Her name's Love, duh. I was watching that whole sequence and I was like, man, these two have great on-screen chemistry. These two have great on-screen chemistry. So adorable. She seems so comfortable, like on set and around Thor. Like, what's going on here? It's his daughter. Yeah, it's nepotism. It's his daughter in real life. But you know what? Fair enough. Like, they do have great chemistry because she trusts him because she's his daughter in real, yeah. She's a Hemsworth, yeah. And there was quite a bit of nepotism in this movie, I must say. Like, if you see the credits, okay, you had some of Taika's kids in this movie as well. Like, there was, they kept it close in the family. Okay, so that's that on Thor. But the next character up isn't quite as much of a fan of him as I guess I am, and that is Stormbreaker. Yup. Stormbreaker gets his own section. Stormbreaker was a VIP. He absolutely was. Stormbreaker's jealous ways was just mwah, was just excellent. The idea that Stormbreaker would be jealous of Mew Mew, Mjolnir, I thought was really, really clever. And Stormbreaker was jealous of any weapon. Like, even when Thor was holding Zeus's lightning bolt, or even thunderbolt, I think it is, he got really jealous then. He got really jealous then. Just that shot of Stormbreaker coming in with the axe first, I thought was hilarious. Also, there was that sequence at the beginning of the film where Thor used Stormbreaker as like a witch's broomstick. Like, he literally got on Stormbreaker and rode it like a witch, like an actual, like, speaking of Harry Potter. Okay, so next character, so to speak, is actually a set of characters. It's the Guardians, because of course we see Thor going on this adventure with the Guardians at the beginning of the movie, following on from what happened previously. I do think that the Guardians were less of a factor in this movie than I had anticipated. They're not in it for very long at all. It's definitely still a Thor film. You know, we all had concerns about how they were going to balance all of these characters, including the Guardians, and the answer is that they're not. They're going to throw out the Guardians as early as possible, just after Peter Quill is able to instill that advice on Thor and encourage him to love again, or allow himself to love again. They are swiftly gone. Yeah, and I think it was a bit underwhelming, honestly. I think the end of, was it like Avengers Endgame that we saw them kind of come together? That promised us, you know, more laughs, more wackiness, more fun adventures with the Guardians and Thor. It promised us some rivalry between Peter Quill and Thor. Like, it promised us a lot, and in the end what we got was pretty underwhelming. And also the Guardians, the way that they're realized here, the way that they're portrayed here, was quite out of character and a little bit off-putting. It felt like they were brushed with like broad strokes and not really, they didn't really feel authentic to the way that they've been portrayed previously. It felt a bit off, basically. So I know that James Gunn was like a consultant in this movie because of the appearance of his characters. So it's a bit odd to me that they missed the mark in terms of, you know, portraying the Guardians of the Galaxy in this movie. It just felt like they were outlines in a colouring book that hadn't been coloured in yet. Like, that's how the Guardians of the Galaxy felt in this movie. And also Chris Pratt just wasn't, he wasn't popping, he wasn't giving that, he felt like a sad Peter Quill. Maybe it's because of Gamora still, you know, Gamora wasn't present in this movie. We don't know where she is. She ran away at the end of Avengers Endgame. It's been a few years now, so we don't know where she is. So, but is it, it's just, it's off. It's off. Okay. Jesus Christ, I'm suffering. I'm in so much pain right now. Who will liberate me from this pain and suffering? Anywho's, next let's talk about Jane Foster. Yes, my girl Jane is back. I say my girl, but I was never really the biggest fan of Jane Foster, if I'm being honest. But she is back. I don't know if you guys noticed, but Marvel is kind of on this low-key mission. Low-key, get it? They're on this mission to redeem some of these female love interests that they introduced early on in the franchise. So we had that with Christine in Doctor Strange, and now we're seeing the same thing happen with Thor's Jane Foster. Now here in this case, we actually have a very significant storyline be told in this movie for the character of Jane Foster, who becomes the mighty Thor. You basically get the broad strokes of the Jane cancer storyline from the comics, where she develops cancer and then she starts using Mjolnir and becomes the mighty Thor. And when she does so, she's strong, she has the power of Thor, she can do anything, but slowly but surely using the hammer is making her even more sick, and it's making the cancer progress even faster. That's only revealed when she's not in full Thor mode. We do see that play out in the movie, but unfortunately it is rushed. Like, it is kind of fast forwarded quite a bit. It's not the most rushed storyline, we'll talk about that in a moment, but it's definitely rushed. And like I said, I think it was a huge disservice to all of these iconic storylines that they had them all in one movie and decided to just, you know, cram them in instead of actually doing them justice and actually, you know, having individual films for each of these iconic storylines from the comics. Aside from all of the comic book stuff, in terms of what we actually got in the movie, I think it was great to see Natalie Portman back. I think she definitely wanted a better send-off for this character instead of the kind of bittersweet one that we got at the end of Thor the Dark World. And I think she did a good job of that, you know, kind of redeeming the character, making her so much stronger and just a more formidable love interest for Thor. She's always been formidable intellectually, but, you know, having that strength and that presence definitely made a difference in the character. And I think they handled the transition, or like the transformation, really, really well in this film. I know that there were a bunch of people calling it woke and blah blah blah, and I too was worried about how they would handle this because of the constant, you know, backlash that we've been seeing against any property that dares to be somewhat progressive. But in this case, I would definitely say there wasn't a feeling of her trying to replace Thor. She wasn't trying to take his space, she was trying to do her own thing, and I think she succeeded in, you know, having that presence whilst at the same time allowing Thor to be Thor in his movie, in his Thor movie in his fourth Thor movie. They convinced us that Thor would have those feelings and that they would bubble up again upon seeing his ex-girlfriend wielding his ex-hammer. And I do think that the chemistry between Natalie Portman and Chris Hemsworth was very, very good as well. They're not my favorite couple in the world, like I said, but considering the story that they wanted to tell, they did a good job executing it. I will say though, if there was another downside, aside from the fact that this whole Jane cancer storyline was fast forwarded, it would be that the moment that Thor discovers that Jane is the new Thor, that she's the mighty Thor, wasn't as impactful as it should have been, and it's for several reasons. First of all, that moment was in the trailer, and so that was already spoiled for us. We already saw exactly what his reaction was and her reaction. We already knew that that moment was coming when we saw the action sequence, so there was no surprise there because of the trailer. And secondly, because we already see Jane through the Thor outfit, you know, through the Thor costume. I'm really struggling with these TH words, guys. She's like Hannah Montana with her like blonde wig. Like, we know it's Miley Cyrus. We know we know it's Miley Stewart, okay? So it's not really a surprise to us. And I feel like it would have been far more effective if there had been an action sequence with the mighty Thor previously where we didn't know their identity. Like, what if we had just seen the mighty Thor with the gold hair and like maybe a full-on mask, you can't see their face, and they're fighting in an action sequence and everyone's like, what, is this the new Thor? And then later on it's revealed that this is in fact Jane Foster. I think that would have been much more surprising and impactful, but instead the sequence that we got was quite predictable and it didn't have that same impact. Although speaking of the look, I have to say that I really loved the mighty Thor look. It was so impressive. Also, those arm muscles. Sis did not miss a single arm day at the gym. Like, I don't know how they did that. I don't know if it's CG. I don't know if it's a costume. Like, I have no idea, but there are times when, you know, Jane is just regular Jane with her regular Jane arms, and then there are other times when her arms look like legs. So like, someone explain that to me, please. But either way, it suited her. The look suited her, which is crazy considering how, you know, small and petite she is. So I think they did a great job of materializing the mighty Thor. I think they did a better job of doing that than they did with Hayley Atwell's live action Captain Britain or Captain Carter, where she looks like the same kind of stature as opposed to looking bigger like she did in the What If series. And lastly, with the character of Jane, of course, we saw at the very end there that she did end up making the ultimate sacrifice by taking on the Thor mantle for one last time, even though she knew that it would end up killing her. And she does in fact die at the very end there, and she ends up going to Valhalla, as we see in the end credits sequence. I thought that was really nice, especially because we got one last moment with Idris Elba's Heimdall, who was a very missed character in the series. I feel like there are characters in the Thor franchise that we were just so used to seeing that their absence was noted. Like, it did feel like something was missing, and one of those characters was definitely Heimdall, and another one was Loki. Oh my god. Another one was Loki, guys. I felt Loki's absence, I must say. It wasn't like a painful feeling. One, because he has his own TV show. He has his own TV show. He's not gone forever. And two, because there was so much going on that I was kind of distracted. But I have to say, the antagonistic sibling dynamic that we've come to love in the Thor franchise was definitely missed in this installment. But anyways, we had Jane going up to Valhalla, showing that she was a truly deserving warrior, which was a really nice moment. Even though technically she didn't die in battle. Like, I don't want to be that girl. Okay, I don't want to be that girl. But she didn't technically die in battle. Now, she died of cancer? No, that is a fight in itself, to be fair. So okay, I'll allow it. She should go to Valhalla. Okay, so next up we have Valkyrie. King Valkyrie. She is officially the king of New Asgard. And I have to say, I was really surprised to see how little she is in this movie. She's in the movie for a moment, especially when they have that first action sequence that takes place in the Land of Shadows or whatever. That was really cool. But then she gets almost fatally injured by Zeus's bolt, which I would have suspected would have killed you instantly. But no, she manages to survive. It's just a bit of a limp. But she is kind of benched for the rest of the film, and she's left to kind of deal with New Asgard. And I think that's a bit of a shame, because one of the best parts, you know, one of the highlights of Thor Ragnarok was seeing the dynamic between Valkyrie and Thor, and especially Valkyrie and the Hulk. That was another thing that was missing from this installment. Although I will say I did enjoy seeing that kind of sisterhood that had developed between her and Jane Foster. That was really nice. Overall, I would say that Valkyrie was kind of wasted in this movie. And also the concept of her being king was kind of wasted. Like, I didn't want them to explain the fact that she's king instead of queen or whatever, but I just wanted to see her rule a little bit more. And also, correct me if I'm mistaken, correct me if I'm misremembering, but didn't someone promise us that there would be a storyline surrounding Valkyrie trying to find a queen? Like, have I made that have I made that up? Or maybe it was like YouTubers, you know, in the Scoop community saying whatever, but I'm pretty sure that was a storyline that we were supposed to be exploring in this movie, and that's how it would have tied into that kind of line that she has, where she doesn't have anyone because of everything that happened previously against Hela, you know, losing the woman that she loved. Like, that was supposed to have an ending. That was supposed to be a fulfilled storyline, but it wasn't. So it was just left just unfinished, like, and that's how Valkyrie's story feels in this movie, is unfinished and unfulfilled. Also, I have to say, New Asgard is cute. Like, New Asgard looks cozy, okay, looks like a nice little village in Norway, but it's not giving Asgard. Like, I know that Thor Ragnarok had the whole thing of, like, Asgard is not a place, it's its people. But the people are looking kind of average, not gonna lie. Like, the people are looking like, where's the warrior people that we came to know and love in the Thor franchise? Like, where are they? All I'm seeing are just regular old Joes, you know, who could be in London, they could be in New York, they could be in Paris, they could be anywhere. I'm not seeing Asgardians. Like, I'm not seeing the people that raised Thor, you know what I mean? So I was actually disappointed to see how the Asgardians have become quite regular and, dare I say, Midgardian. also, Heimdall has a son, apparently. Heimdall has a son. I really like that kid. I thought he was really great. You know, he was the one kind of leading the group of kids that were kidnapped by Gorr. They were kidnapped by Gorr, and I thought he was really adorable and really great. I love the fact that he has his father's powers, and he was kind of learning to use them, and in the end that he was being trained by Sif in his own little corner on the beach. So he might be a really important factor in the future. I think they're setting up something there, perhaps. Let's see if they actually fulfill that potential. But yeah, I can definitely see something going on there, and I think he was a really great character, a really great addition to the story. And also, I don't know how many side notes I've made here, but the kids getting the powers was one of my favorite scenes in this whole movie. Oh my goodness, the moment where the kids are in like the shadow realm or whatever it's called, and Thor tells them to pick up a weapon, and so they're picking out their weapons like true Asgardian warrior children. They're picking out their weapons, and then Thor enchants the weapons just like Odin enchanted his hammer. I thought that was amazing. Oh my goodness, that was giving strong dad energy. That was definitely giving where he was like, he who shall ever, you know, lift these weapons shall temporarily have the powers of Thor. I thought that was amazing. Like, it was really, it harkened back to the first Thor film with Odin doing the same to Mew Mew, but at the same time it had that twist because it's Thor and he's not, you know, completely selfless. So he said temporarily, like he said, for a limited time you would have the powers of Thor. That was such a great moment. I really love that, and it also showed just how powerful Thor is in this movie. I forgot to mention previously, Thor is so damn powerful. He is such an OP character, and in that moment when he was able to enchant all of those weapons with his powers, it really illustrated that. Okay, so enough side notes. Let's move on to the next main character, Gorr the God Butcher. Guys, it's Christian Bale. I can't get over the fact that Christian Bale is in the MCU. I can't get over it. Like, I'm sorry, it's amazing to me, although perhaps I shouldn't get too comfortable because he's, I guess, no longer in the MCU just as quickly. Like, literally just as quickly as he came, he left. But Gorr is such a fascinating character to me. I think he's visually striking, like I said before. I think the effects that they used for this character, making him like a horror-inspired character, were genius. I think that Christian Bale knocked his performance out of the park. He absolutely did. I mean, there was no doubt, was there? Please, it was Christian Bale. There was no doubt that he would be good. There was no doubt that he would eat, but he didn't have to eat this much, although he had lost quite a bit of weight for this role. But figuratively speaking, the guy didn't have to eat this much. Like, he left no crumbs. He left no crumbs for the other girlies. Like, what's going on? Casting wise, Christian Bale was just a stroke of genius portraying this character. But the thing that let him down was the story. The thing that let him down was the fact that this character barely had any time to breathe, barely had any time to marinate, because his story was fast forwarded. It was resigned to being at the beginning of the film in just this short 7-minute sequence where we establish his entire backstory, and then afterwards he's just left to his devices, you know, causing hell and havoc, you know, amongst the cosmos. But we don't actually get a lot of depth to the character, and I think that's such a damn shame. Marvel, why? He could have had his own movie. Like, he could have had his own film without the Jane Cancer storyline kind of taking up screen time. We could have just delved into this character because it's so fascinating. There was potential for such layered, complex storytelling. There's theological, philosophical themes here to explore about the belief in gods, about reliance on gods. Like, there was so much that we could have handled here, but no, it was wasted. It was wasted, on top of the fact that this incredible actor was wasted, and it breaks my heart. As cool and terrifying as this character looked, the story, the writing didn't back up the potential of the character. And I think it's just such a damn shame, because Christian Bale did not come to play. He was delivering in every single scene, so why weren't the writers? And Taika is one of them. I'm looking at you, Taika. Why weren't you delivering? And I'm sorry, but I have a bone to pick with Marvel because I am sick and tired. Why did this guy die at the end of the movie? Tell me, why did I knew it would happen? I knew it would happen because I have eyes and I've seen what's happened in the past. We'll talk about it. But why did my man die at the end of the movie? Why can't we just have one villain that survives the movie? It's incredible to me, especially because, you know, Thor, of all franchises, was known for having an amazing villain at the beginning. Loki was one of the best villains in the entire franchise for a moment there, and it's because he was established so well in the first Thor film, and then they continue to use him as a main villain for the Avengers movie when everyone comes together to fight against him. It made for a very effective villain in the first Avengers movie. So why not continue that? Why not, like, you know, why not take that lesson, okay, that Kenneth Branagh gave you and continue that along with this movie as well? But no, instead we have to have yet another one and done, and I just do not understand it, other than from a business or industry perspective where these well-known actors are joining the MCU for a quick project, for the association with this franchise, and even for a quick paycheck, and then heading on out. Like literally in, put on the prosthetics, put on the makeup, and then get the F out. We've seen this so many times at this point. We saw this with Annette Bening in Captain Marvel, with Robert Redford in Captain America the Winter Soldier, with Jeff Bridges even. Like, it was established early on in the MCU that you would have these prestigious actors portraying these villains and they would not last beyond one movie. It's kind of like an unwritten rule in the MCU's formula, and I think it's doing the franchise a huge disservice. I would have loved to see Christian Bale continue on as a villain in this franchise, perhaps even one of the major villains of Phase 4, which seems to be going nowhere. But no, instead they decided to kill him off at the end. And yes, it was an emotional moment. Yes, it was very touching to see his daughter back, but I would have preferred him to be alive, personally. Now, going back to the story itself and how they use the character of Gorr, I will say that I wish we could have seen Gorr killing more gods. You know, I mean, this is a character called Gorr the God Butcher. Gorr the God Butcher. Now, of course, this is a 12 or, you know, PG-13 movie, so they're never gonna make it too violent. They're never gonna make him too bloodthirsty, because then we'd have to show the blood, and they don't want to do that. But, you know, we needed to push the boundary a little bit, because he's called Gorr the God Butcher. I didn't just want to see him, you know, use his monsters to kidnap Asgardian children. That was cool. That was cute. It was very the boogeyman from Rise of the Guardians. If you guys have seen Rise of the Guardians, you know that character was very similar to the way that Gorr is portrayed in this movie. Comment down below if you watched DreamWorks' Rise of the Guardians, and yeah, you'll see the similarities between him and the boogeyman, who in that film is voiced by Jude Law. Anywho, that was really cool, you know, seeing that in live action. I think he was actualized really well with the CG. It was a cool effect. He was very scary. But I wanted a scene where he was just like killing a bunch of gods. Why not have him come to Olympus maybe and kill a bunch of Greco-Roman gods, or maybe some Egyptian gods that we saw in Moon Knight, or maybe some, you know, Wakandan gods from the Black Panther franchise. Like, why not have him actually killing some notable gods to really establish how terrifying he is? Instead, we only see him shank one god. I really wanted him to go on a murder spree, but instead we had him kidnapping children, which, you know, obviously terrible, really, really bad. But I'm just saying, he's not called Gorr the child kidnapper. And finally, guys, I did want to reserve one slot for one of my favorite characters in this entire damn movie. Truly just a gem. Truly, oh, and I think they're kind of breaking the Marvel curse here by having this established actor perhaps be in more than one of these films. But that is Russell Crowe as Zeus. Can't even say it with a straight face, not only because my teeth are hurting. Russell Crowe as Zeus is a gift. It's the gift that kept on giving. Guys, I was actually shook. The moment that he opened his mouth and some Italian noises came out, I was like, this is going to be excellent. This is going to be exceptional. Give him the Oscar now. He was incredible as Zeus. I loved it. I loved every single second of it. I loved his hair. I loved his skirt. I love the way that he walked down the stairs. I love the way that he walked down the stairs. I love the way that he was just such a showman, but clearly he doesn't care about looking after his people. He gives Thor this speech about, oh, I'm a Greco-Roman god. Why would I care about your Asgardian people? But in reality, he doesn't even care about his own people. He doesn't care about anyone. He doesn't care about anything. I really love the way that they portrayed this MCU version of Zeus, and I'm so excited to see the introduction of Greco-Roman mythology in the MCU. Some of you guys will know that one of the things I've said many times on this channel is that I wish we got to see more Greco-Roman mythology in these franchises. I love the fact that the DCEU incorporated that in Wonder Woman, and I wish they'd done more of that, but now we're getting to see a completely different version a completely different version in the MCU. It's wackier, it's crazier, it's super camp, super camp, but I love it. I love Greco-Roman mythology, and the fact that it's melding together with the Thor franchise, which is already based off of Norse mythology very loosely, I think is really exciting to me. And I couldn't help but notice, and this was something that brought an even bigger smile to my face, but not only did we get the melding of Greco-Roman mythology with Norse mythology in this sequence, but we also saw just a ton of different gods from a ton of different cultures be represented in the omnipotent Omnicity, I don't know what the hell it's called. I thought that was so cool. I saw some, like, you know, African gods. I saw some perhaps Aboriginal gods. I just saw all of these different gods be represented in that whole sequence, and I just thought that was amazing, because for the longest time when we thought of mythology, we always thought of either Greek, you know, Roman, Norse, or perhaps Egyptian. But diving into these different myths and legends and gods, and being able to see them represented on screen in this huge environment, this huge CG environment, I thought was really great. But then of course we had the mid-credit sequence. In the mid-credit sequence, we see Zeus lying down. He was shanked by his own thunderbolts, okay, not lightning bolts. I keep thinking of Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Anywho, but he was shanked with his own thunderbolt, and he's lying down like, woe is me. You know, people no longer have respect for the gods anymore. I wonder why. I wonder why you're wasting time throwing orgies instead of helping people. I wonder why. Anyway, so, oh, no one respects the gods anymore. Everyone looks up to the sky for heroes, and, you know, they respect heroes more. And then he's like, but you're going to change this. He's talking to someone. He's not just talking to the air or to his maids or to his attendees. He's like, you're going to change this, aren't you, son? Aren't you, Hercules? And then the camera pans, and and my mind blew, and it's just a split second. It's a split second of a moment, of a millisecond, but we get to see the MCU's Hercules, and he is portrayed by Roy Kent. guys, if you watch Ted Lasso, put your hands up if you watch Ted Lasso. Me, okay, people of taste. And if you haven't watched it yet, I would highly recommend it. But you know how much of a big deal this is. You understand how much of a big deal it is to have Brett Goldstein portraying Hercules. This is perfect casting. This is as perfect casting as Chris Hemsworth as Thor. I'm not even exaggerating. Those of you who have watched Ted Lasso know I am not exaggerating. I was so excited, and that's why I need Thor 5 to come out now. I need, like, whatever is in between Thor 4 and Thor 5 needs to disappear. I mean, Black Panther 2 can stay where it is. Everything else disappear, and I need Thor 5 to be the next project after that, because I am so excited. I am so excited to see Hercules. One of the reasons why I'm so passionate and I have so much love for Greco-Roman mythology in the first place is because of Disney's Hercules, which came out literally like a year or two after I was born, and I grew up watching that film over and over again on a cassette tape that literally just broke after I watched it so many times. So this means the world to me. This means the world to me. The live action Hercules already has my heart pounding, but this was something I never saw coming, and I'm so excited for it. But I'm also super nervous because I hope that they do this character justice. And so guys, with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Thor Love and Thunder an 8 out of 10. But that's it from me, guys. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Thor Love and Thunder, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this movie and the Thor franchise as a whole down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and thank you for bearing with me with this toothache. It was a real struggle. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.